I've always prided myself on being a person who notices things. Little things. The way a person's voice changes when they're talking to someone they love versus someone they're just being polite to. The way a familiar car sounds pulling into the driveway at night. The small, almost invisible shifts in a routine that tell you, deep down, that something isn't quite right. But sometimes, you don't want to notice. You push those feelings down so deep they become a dull ache you just learn to live with. You tell yourself you're imagining things. You tell yourself you're being paranoid. You tell yourself that a marriage of 12 years is just a little quiet sometimes, and that's normal. I stood in that airport terminal, holding a silly little sign I'd made that morning. It was just a piece of cardboard and a purple marker. It said, "Welcome home, Mark," with a little heart next to his name. I was nervous, the way you are when you're doing something unexpected. My husband, Mark, had been gone for 10 days on a business trip, the longest we'd been apart in all our years together. I thought I was being spontaneous. I thought I was being romantic. I thought I was surprising the man I loved. I was standing near the baggage claim at gate B17, my heart beating a little faster every time those automatic doors slid open. I was scanning the faces, looking for his familiar walk, his familiar smile. That's when I felt a small presence next to me. I looked down, and there was a little girl. She was maybe 8 years old. She was wearing a hoodie that was way too big for her, the sleeves hanging over her hands. She had a backpack on, and a serious, steady look in her eyes that seemed out of place for a child. She looked up at me and she didn't smile. She just said in a quiet, calm voice, "You should probably hide." I was so caught off guard, I just stared at her. I thought maybe she was playing a game or maybe she was lost. I knelt down to her level. "Hide?" I asked, keeping my voice soft. "From what?" She didn't answer right away. She just tilted her head, looking past me toward the crowd of people coming through the doors. Then she looked back at me, her eyes holding mine with an intensity that sent a shiver down my spine. "The man with the gray suitcase," she said. "He doesn't know I'm here either." I didn't know why, but something in her voice, something in the way she stood so still made me listen. I stepped back, pulling her gently with me behind a big concrete pillar. I didn't know this child, but my instincts told me to protect her. I knelt down again. "What's your name, sweetheart?" I asked. "Lily," she said. "Are you here alone, Lily?" She nodded just once. No fear, no worry, just a simple fact. My heart clenched. "Who are you waiting for?" I asked. She looked back at the doors one more time, then back at me. She said the words so plainly, without any drama, that they felt more real than anything I'd ever heard. "Same person you are, I think." And in that moment, everything in my world went silent. The sound of the airport, the announcements, the chatter, it all just faded away. It was just me and this little girl, and the weight of what she just said. My name is Linda, and for most of my life, I've been the one who keeps everything running smoothly. I'm a project manager for a software company, which is just a fancy way of saying I spend my days solving problems and making sure nothing falls apart. I'm good at it. I'm organized. I'm efficient. I pay the bills on time, I remember birthdays, and I can pack a suitcase for a 2-week trip in under 20 minutes. I met Mark at a friend's barbecue 12 years ago. He was standing by the grill, burning hamburgers and telling a story that made everyone laugh. He had this easy confidence, this way of making you feel like you were the only person in the room when he talked to you. We started dating, and he was wonderful. He was thoughtful. He'd leave little notes in my car. He'd call me on his lunch break just to hear about my day. When we got married, I felt like I had won the lottery of life. Our life wasn't flashy. It was a good, solid, comfortable life. We lived in a little house in the suburbs with a fenced-in yard for our dog, a golden retriever named Gus. We had friends over for barbecues. We went on road trips to see his family in Ohio every Thanksgiving. We had a routine. It wasn't a perfect marriage because no marriage is perfect, but it was a happy one, or at least I thought it was. I knew his work smile. I knew his tired smile. I knew the smile he'd give me when I walked into the room after a long day. I thought I knew everything about him. But about 6 months ago, I started noticing small shifts. Things so tiny that at first I didn't even register them. He started working late more often, but not so late that it was alarming. Just an hour here, an hour there. He'd come home, tell me about a deadline, a project that needed extra attention. I'd make him dinner, we'd watch an episode of our show, and life would go on. Then came the second phone. He said it was for work. A new client required a separate line, he explained. It made sense. He was a regional sales manager. His job was all about communication. I didn't think twice about it. He kept it in his briefcase, and sometimes, when he'd get a notification, he'd glance at it quickly and put it away. I noticed he'd take it with him when he went to the backyard or when he was in the garage. I told myself he just needed some quiet to think. His texts to me changed too. They used to be quick and playful. A photo of a funny bumper sticker he saw, a message saying, "Thinking of you." A voice note with background noise just saying he was on his way home and couldn't wait to see me. But over those last few months, his texts became neat, precise. "Running late, don't wait up. At a client dinner, we'll be quiet." They were careful. They were polite. They were not him. And then there was the money. Mark had always handled our finances. I'm good at organizing projects, but he was the numbers person. He managed our investments, our savings. He told me we should keep our savings account a little leaner because the market was unstable. It was a smart move, he said. We'd put off the kitchen renovation we'd been planning just to be safe. It made sense. He always made things make sense. I pushed all these little doubts down. I buried them under to-do lists and work deadlines and the comfortable routine of our life. I told myself I was being silly. I told myself every marriage goes through phases. I told myself he was just stressed. So when he left for a 10-day sales conference in Dallas, I thought, this is it. This is our chance to miss each other, to remember what we have. By the 9th day, I missed him so much it felt like a physical ache. I woke up that morning, looked at his empty side of the bed, and made a decision. I was going to surprise him. I was going to pick him up at the airport with a silly sign and a big hug and remind us both of who we were. It felt brave. It felt romantic. It felt like the right thing to do. It was the worst decision I ever made. I pressed my back against that cold concrete pillar at the airport, holding Lily's hand. My mind was racing, but my body felt frozen. "Lily," I whispered, my voice trembling. "What's your daddy's name?" She looked up at me, her big brown eyes so calm. "Mark," she said. It was like a door slamming shut in my chest. Mark, the man I'd been married to for 12 years, the man who'd been gone for 10 days. He was her father, and I had no idea she existed. I looked back out at the crowd, and then I saw him. Mark walked through the automatic doors, pulling his suitcase behind him, his gray suitcase. He looked just like he always did, relaxed, confident. He was looking down at his phone, and he had that smile on his face, that soft, private smile, not his work smile, not his talking to his mother smile. It was something else, something intimate. And then a woman appeared behind him. She was in her mid-30s, maybe. She had dark hair pulled back in a ponytail and was carrying a small duffel bag. She touched his arm, just a light, familiar touch, and he slowed his pace to match hers without even looking up. It was a movement so natural, so practiced, that it told me everything. They had walked side by side 1,000 times before. My breath caught in my throat. I pulled Lily closer behind the pillar. "Who is that lady, Lily?" I asked, my voice barely audible. Lily didn't even look. She just said, "That's my mom. Her name is Sarah. He comes to visit us sometimes." He comes to visit us. Not, we go see him. Not, we are a family. He comes to visit them, as if they were a destination. As if his life with me was the real life and they were a trip he took. I looked at the woman, Sarah. She was composed, she was pretty. She was laughing at something Mark had said. She looked tired like Lily did, but there was a quiet strength in her. Mark put his hand on her lower back for a moment, a gesture so casual it hurt to watch. "Lily," I said, trying to keep my voice from cracking. Does he know you know about me, about his other home?" Lily shook her head, pulling the sleeve of her hoodie over her hand. "No, he doesn't think I pay attention." A tiny, sad smile touched her lips. Adults never think kids pay attention. She was right, we don't. We see children as little people who are just living in their own world, not paying attention to ours. But they see everything. They feel everything. They absorb the tension, the secrets, the lies, even when we think we're being so clever. I watched Mark and Sarah stop near a bench. He was talking, his hands moving, his face animated. He was explaining something. She listened, nodding. He was being charming the way he always was. I had my phone in my hand. I opened the camera. I wasn't doing it to be dramatic. I wasn't thinking about confrontation or revenge. I just needed a record. I needed to see the whole picture, to understand the full shape of the life I had been living inside before I decided what to do. I took a photo of them, the two of them standing together. I watched them walk out of the terminal, Mark's hand on the handle of her duffel bag, Lily's mother, heading toward the parking garage. They walked as a family, the family I didn't know existed. When they were gone, I finally let myself lean against the pillar and breathe. Lily was still there, holding her backpack straps, watching me with those calm, knowing eyes. "Your mom, is she okay?" I asked. Lily shook her head, looking down at her shoes. "She's sick. She's been in the hospital. That's why he's been coming to see us more, to check on things." She paused. "He says to check on things." I thought about the careful texts, the second phone, the way he'd started moving money, the home renovation we had put on hold. It wasn't about the market being unstable. It was about him supporting a second family. "Does he know you took the bus here?" I asked, realizing how dangerous it was for an 8-year-old to be alone in an airport. "No," she said simply. "I wanted to see her come home. My mom. She was coming home from the hospital today. He was picking her up. I just wanted to see her." My heart shattered for this little girl. She was so brave, so self-sufficient, and she was just trying to see her mother walk out of an airport, healthy and alive. And the man who was supposed to be her father, the man who was supposed to be my husband, had created this whole separate life, full of secrets and lies, and she was just trying to navigate it the best way she knew how. I put my phone away. I looked at Lily. "Come on," I said, holding out my hand. "Let's get you something to eat, and then we'll figure out how to get you home." I didn't go home that night. I couldn't face him. I texted him a lie, something about my flight being delayed, and I drove to a hotel near the airport. I sat in the dark room for hours, staring at the photo on my phone, trying to piece together the last 12 years of my life. It felt like I had been living in a house I'd built with my own hands, only to find out that half of it was a hollow shell, hiding a whole other structure that was secretly attached. The next day, I called my sister, Bate. Bate is a paralegal. She's the one in the family who tells you what you need to hear, not what you want to hear. I told her everything, and she listened. When I was done, she didn't say, "I'm so sorry." She didn't say, "What a jerk." She said, "Okay, now we get to work." She told me I needed to be smart, not emotional. Smart. I needed to understand the financial situation. I needed to know exactly what I was dealing with before I said a single word to Mark. Over the next 2 weeks, I became a detective in my own life. While Mark went to work, smiling, acting like everything was normal, I started digging. I went through our bank statements. I found transfers I didn't recognize, small amounts, $300 here, $500 there, all adding up to a significant sum. I found credit card charges for a gas station and a grocery store in a town I'd never been to, a town an hour north of where we lived. I found a receipt for a pediatrician's office in that same town. I also thought about Lily. I couldn't get her out of my mind, her quiet bravery, her resigned calm. I knew where she lived. I had heard her tell me the town's name. A few days after the airport, I drove there. I found their house. It was a small, modest place, nothing like our suburban home. The lawn was a little overgrown. There was a child's bike lying on the front walkway. I sat in my car across the street for almost an hour, watching. I wasn't going to confront anyone. I just needed to see it, to make it real. Then, the front door opened and Lily came out. She was in her big hoodie again. She was carrying a watering can and slowly, carefully, started watering the drooping flowers on the front porch. She was so focused, so gentle with those flowers. She looked up and she saw my car. She didn't look surprised. She just stared for a moment, then put the watering can down and walked to the curb. I rolled down my window. "Hi," I said, feeling foolish. "Hi," she said. "Are you following us?" "No," I said quickly. I wanted to make sure you got home safe, that you and your mom were okay." "She's tired," Lily said, "but she's home." I nodded. I wanted to say so many things. I wanted to tell her I was sorry, Sorry that her father was a liar. Sorry that she had to live in the shadows of his secret. But I didn't. "Can I talk to your mom?" I asked, "when she's feeling a little better." Lily studied me for a long moment, just like she had at the airport. Then she gave a single, small nod. "She knows something isn't right," she said. "She just doesn't have the energy to look at it yet." I understood that completely. I had been living that way for months. The next week, I called Bait and told her I was ready. She connected me with a lawyer she knew, a woman named Diane who specialized in this exact kind of thing. "High asset, high secret divorces," Bait called it with a bitter laugh. Diane was calm, methodical, and smart. I gave her everything I had found. She told me to keep gathering evidence, to keep quiet, and to not let Mark know anything was wrong. It was the hardest thing I've ever done, smiling at him over dinner, asking him about his day, lying next to him at night, my mind racing, while he slept peacefully, dreaming of a life that was split in two. The final piece of the puzzle came from a source I didn't expect. A few days after I drove past their house, I came home from work and found a plain manila envelope on our front porch. No return address, no name. Inside, there were copies of documents, a mortgage application for the little house in the town north of us. Mark's name was on it, along with a woman's name, Sarah Jenkins. He had co-signed the loan. He was legally and financially tied to her. And there was a copy of a bank statement, a separate account, just in his name, that was funding their life. The amount at the bottom made my hands go cold. He had moved nearly $40,000 from our joint savings into that account over the past 2 years. The money for our kitchen renovation, the money for our retirement, the money we had worked for together. I don't know who sent that envelope. I have my suspicions, but I'll never know for sure. Maybe it was Sarah, ready to finally look at the truth. Maybe it was someone else who knew. But when I saw those numbers, the quiet part of me, the part that was still holding on to the hope that maybe, somehow, I was wrong, went silent. And the part that needed to survive woke up. 3 weeks after I found Lily at the airport, I had my first meeting with Sarah. I drove to her small house on a Tuesday afternoon. I was terrified. My hands were shaking on the steering wheel. Bait had told me to keep it simple. No accusations, no anger, just the truth, offered quietly to someone who deserved to know it as much as I did. Lily opened the door. She looked at me, then stepped aside. "She's in the kitchen," she said. Sarah was sitting at a small kitchen table. She was thinner than the woman I'd seen at the airport, but there was a clarity in her eyes that wasn't there before. She looked at me, and I could see she already knew who I was. There was no surprise on her face, just a quiet resignation. "Lily told me you might come," she said, her voice soft. I stood there for a moment, taking her in. The woman my husband had been lying to for years, just like me. "I'm not here to make anything harder for you," I said, my voice catching. "I just think we've both been managing pieces of the same problem without knowing it." She gestured to the chair across from her. "Sit down," she said. We sat at her kitchen table for almost 3 hours. We were two women who should have been enemies, but instead, we found ourselves on the same side. She told me her story. She had met Mark at a conference 6 years ago. He had pursued her. He had promised her a future. He had told her he was in the process of a divorce, that it was almost finalized, that he was just living in a separate room in the house for the sake of appearances. She had believed him because she wanted to believe him. She had a child to think about, and he seemed like the answer. She had found out the truth a year ago after she got sick. A friend of hers had seen our wedding photo online. She had confronted him. He had cried, he had promised to leave me, he had made excuse after excuse. But he never did. He just kept visiting. He just kept sending money. He just kept her and Lily in that small house, waiting for a life he was never going to give them. I showed her the documents I had found, the mortgage he had co-signed without telling me, the bank account he had siphoned money into. When I showed her the numbers, something in her face shifted. It didn't collapse. It settled. Like a question she'd been carrying for so long, finally receiving its honest answer. "He told me he was supporting us from what he could spare," she said, her voice a whisper. "He made it sound like it was a sacrifice, like he was giving us everything he had." "He was giving you what he was taking from us," I said. She nodded slowly, her jaw tightening. "He was building one life by stealing from another." It was the most honest conversation I've ever had. There was no anger, no blame, just two women sitting at a table, finally seeing the full picture of the man they had both loved. And in that picture, he was not the charming, confident man I had married. He was just a man who was afraid to tell the truth, a man who had tried to have two lives and ended up failing both of them. We didn't make a plan that day. We didn't become friends, but we made a promise to each other. We promised to be honest from that moment on about everything, because the lies had hurt us both enough. A few days later, I called Diane, my lawyer. I gave her everything: the mortgage documents, the bank statements, the photos from the airport. I told her about Sarah, and she told me that having her as a witness would be invaluable. I told her to file the papers. Mark came home that night to a different world than he had left. I was sitting at our kitchen table, the same table where I had planned our future, where I had dreamed of our kitchen renovation, where I had served him dinner 1,000 times. I had the divorce papers in front of me. He walked in, saw them, and his face went pale. He said my name just once: Linda. I looked at him. I didn't feel anger. I felt a strange, hollow kind of peace. I know about Sarah, I said. I know about Lily. I know about the money. He opened his mouth to speak, to explain, to lie. I could see it in his eyes. The old charm, the easy words, ready to build a new narrative for me to live in. But then he closed his mouth. For the first time in our marriage, he had nothing to say. He just stood there in the doorway of our kitchen and looked at the pile of papers that represented the collapse of everything he had tried to hold together. He left that night. He didn't fight it. I think in the end, he was relieved. Relieved that he didn't have to pretend anymore. Relieved that the weight of his secrets was finally off his shoulders. He moved into an apartment downtown, and the divorce moved forward with a quiet efficiency that surprised me. Diane was brilliant. The settlement was clean. The mortgage on Sarah's house was resolved in a way that protected her and Lily. The money he had siphoned was returned to me, with enough left over to finally do the kitchen renovation I had been planning. But when the contractors came to tear out the old cabinets, I told them to hold off. I didn't want to build something new in that house, in that kitchen where I had sat with so many secrets. I wanted to sell it. I moved into a smaller place, a condo in the city near my sister. It wasn't the dream home I had imagined, but it was mine. It was clean. It was honest. The divorce was finalized on a rainy Tuesday in October. I remember because I went to my lawyer's office to sign the final papers, and when I came out, the rain had stopped and there was a rainbow over the courthouse. I'm not a sentimental person, but I stood there for a minute and let myself feel it. The end of one thing, the beginning of something else. I didn't feel triumphant. I felt tired. The kind of tired that seeps into your bones when you've held yourself together for so long that you forget what it feels like to just let go. But there was a peace there, too. A quiet certainty that I had done the right thing. I hadn't been reactive. I had been precise. And I had come out on the other side with my dignity and my future intact. A few weeks later, I got a letter in the mail. There was no return address, but I recognized the handwriting on the envelope. It was childish, careful, with a little heart drawn next to the address. Inside was a drawing. It was done with crayons, a little lopsided, but so full of life. It showed two women sitting at a kitchen table. One had brown hair, one had dark hair. They were both smiling. In the doorway behind them, there was a small figure in a big hoodie watching them. There was no caption. She didn't need one. I framed that drawing. It hangs in my new kitchen, right next to the window where the morning light comes in. It's not a reminder of what I lost. It's a marker of the moment I finally saw things clearly. Sarah and I don't talk often. What we have isn't a friendship exactly. It's something more specific. It's an understanding built from shared damage and a mutual respect that can only come from surviving the same storm. We text sometimes, mostly about Lily. She tells me Lily is doing well in school. She's joined the math club and wants to be an engineer when she grows up. I believe her completely. She was the most determined little girl I'd ever met. I saw Mark once, about 6 months after everything was final. I was at a coffee shop and he walked in with a woman I didn't recognize. He looked older somehow, smaller. He saw me, and for a moment he looked like he wanted to come over, to talk, to explain. But then he just gave a small, tight smile and looked away. I took a sip of my coffee and didn't look back. The funny thing is, I kept the silly cardboard sign I made for him at the airport. I found it in the back of my car a few days after I moved into my new place. The purple marker had smudged a little. The heart next to his name was still there. I looked at it for a long time. I almost threw it away, but I didn't. I put it in a drawer next to the framed drawing from Lily. It's not a reminder of a man I loved and lost. It's a reminder of the last moment I was certain about something that wasn't true. Certainty, I've learned, is a dangerous thing. It's only valuable when it's earned. When you've looked at the truth, all of it, the painful parts and the beautiful parts, and you can stand in it without flinching. My life now is quieter. It's simpler. I don't have a husband to come home to, but I have a home that feels like mine. I have a sister who answers the phone at 2 a.m. I have a framed drawing from a brave little girl who taught me more about courage than I ever thought possible. And I have this, the knowledge that even when the people we love let us down, even when the world we thought we were living in turns out to be a lie, we can still choose to be honest. We can still choose to be kind. We can still choose to sit at a kitchen table with a stranger and build a truth that belongs to both of us. That's the thing about secrets. They have a way of coming to the light. And when they do, you have a choice. You can let them destroy you, or you can let them show you who you really are. I choose to believe that I'm the kind of woman who doesn't hide behind a pillar anymore. The kind of woman who holds her sign high, even if it's for nobody but herself. The kind of woman who can look at a little girl, see the truth in her eyes, and have the courage to let it change everything. Because sometimes, the people we least expect, the quiet strangers, the brave children, are the ones who help us find our way back to ourselves. And that, I think, is worth more than any certainty I ever had.